Keep your filthy hands off Trump Tower. That's Donald Trump's latest fundraising pitch to his supporters. Quote, insane radical Democrat AG Letitia James wants to seize my properties in New York. The tone of Trump's fundraising emails are always blaringly urgent. But new reporting today suggests that Donald Trump really is panicking about losing his properties. His lawyers claim he's approached more than 30 potential lenders, but so far, none have come through. They say that coming up with a bond of that size is a practical impossibility. Today, the New York Attorney General's office urged an appellate court not to buy those claims, saying that, quote, defendants' argument that obtaining a full bond is purportedly impossible is based on the false premise that they must obtain a single bond from a single surety for the entire judgment amount of $464 million, end quote. And so we wait to see what happens next. Unless the appeals court weighs in and pauses the judgment, if Trump does not find some way to come up with the money before Monday, New York Attorney General Letitia James really can start the process of seizing Trump's assets. And she has made very clear that she's prepared to do just that.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court. And we will ask the judge to seize his assets. We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers. And yes, I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day.
I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day. The Attorney General has never once mentioned Trump Tower, Trump's New York City home. Still today, the allies of the former president leaked word to the New York Post that Trump is now considering just letting the New York Attorney General seize Trump Tower. Quote, it's an option Trump appears to have considered, partly because he believes the chances are good that he could recover the assets on appeal, even if he's forced to take his case to the U.S. Supreme Court, according to friends, end quote. Now, there are a number of problems with that logic. One, Trump could very easily lose on appeal and therefore lose any chance of getting his property back. Two, even if he did win on appeal, this is interesting, there's no guarantee he would get the seized property back. As one expert told the New York Post, quote, they're going after the money, and that's all he has a right to get back, not the buildings, end quote. Now, Trump does have other options to prevent the state from immediately seizing his assets. He could, for instance, declare bankruptcy. Trump's businesses have, after all, already declared bankruptcy 6 times before. So, hey, what's the 7th bankruptcy at this point? But according to reporting today from CNN, quote, Trump has privately expressed opposition to any path concerning filing for bankruptcy, end quote. Then there's the possibility that Trump could borrow the money from a foreign power looking to exert influence over Trump, a country like Russia or Saudi Arabia. That theory has mostly been suggested by Trump critics. But watch what happened today when Fox News asked Trump's lawyer if they were considering doing just that.
Is there any effort on the part of your team to secure this money through another country, Saudi Arabia or Russia, as Joy Behar seems to think?
Well, there's rules and regulations that are public. I can't speak about strategy that require certain things, and we have to follow those rules.
The question was, are you considering getting money from Saudi Arabia or Russia? The answer there, in case you didn't get that, was, well, there's rules and regulations. I can't speak about strategy. We have to follow those rules. Yeah, of course, because Trump is a big rules guy, as we all know. That response from Trump's lawyer was not exactly the resounding no you might expect if Trump had actually ruled the option of getting money from foreign governments out. So what happens now? Joining me now, Adam Pollack, former Assistant Attorney General in New York, and Adam Klasfeld, who's been covering the court proceedings for Just Security. Thanks to both of you for being here. Adam, let's talk about this. We've sort of tried to lay out the possibilities, but assuming something doesn't happen, Donald Trump has to produce something in 5 days. He's got to produce either a bond or the money.
So he either has to produce a bond, which will stave off enforcement, a bond in the full amount of the judgment, plus interest, expected interest. You're talking about $500+ million bond. That stops enforcement. All enforcement stops while the appeal is pending. And if he loses the appeal, the full amount is paid within 10 days to the state. That's option A. Option B is enforcement can start. Enforcement, the Attorney General's office has said that they'll give a 30-day grace period. They don't have to. In state court, there's no 30-day stay period. There's no window, but they've given till Monday. That means on Monday, they can start seizing financial assets.
Literally, they can go and put a notice on the door of one of his buildings or something?
So there's a sheriff in New York City and a marshal in New York City, sort of like the Wild West, but meets New York City. The Attorney General's office can sign what's called an execution. Nobody dies except for the assets, as it were. Signs an execution, delivers it with a $50 fee to the office of the sheriff or a city marshal, and the marshal can walk into the bank and execute on the assets, drain the bank accounts. And ordinarily, you'd wonder, okay, where does this defendant bank? But here, conveniently, the Attorney General's trial, they did a 2-month trial that was a complete roadmap to his assets.
Right.
They know exactly where he banks.
Adam, are you curious about this? People have speculated this for a while, that at the level of about $500 million, Donald Trump may have trouble raising this money. Now, this is not to say that his value does not exceed this, but it's tied up in assets. We now have a much clearer picture of Donald Trump's cash situation than we have had for all those years of trying to get his tax returns.
Absolutely. And we have a clear picture of his universe and constellation of businesses, from Judge Barbara Jones, who is the court monitor and who is looking over everything. Her recent report said that there are 512 different entities.
Wow.
Now, that is something, as Adam said earlier, it's a roadmap where we, the public, may not yet, even people who have been following this very closely, have a clear idea of what this maze and thicket of companies are. But the AG knows that.
Right.
The monitor knows that. And pretty soon, that might be coming to a head in the enforcement phase.
Adam, let's talk about the fairness of the system, right? If you are found responsible and you have to pay money, there is an appeals process. And if you put someone else into the situation who's not Donald Trump, it may be onerous for people to come up with money, which is why we have the surety system. Tell me how that works. Why does what does the surety mean? What does the bond mean versus him actually having the money?
So the bond is written by an insurance broker on behalf of an insurance company. And unlike your car insurance or your homeowner's insurance, most cars don't crash, right? And so you might pay $2,000 a year to insure a $30,000 car. But most people lose their appeal, right? You already lost in the court below. So this insurer is taking a significant risk, right? They are ensuring that the full amount of the judgment from the court below will be paid if the Attorney General, in this case, the plaintiff, wins her appeal, if Trump loses the appeal. So the bond pays out. It's an insurance policy, effectively, that pays out the full amount. Okay.
Adam, he's got assets, but this is never, for anybody who has any assets at all, anybody who's got a car or a house, nobody wants to have to liquidate it in fire sale terms. Obviously, in this particular instance, if he loses an asset, he has to give up, or if the sheriff and the marshal come and put a claim on a property beyond his bank accounts, you don't always get the best value for that. So that can't be Trump's preferred option.
Oh, it can't be. And one of the interesting things in the interview that Tish James gave, she mentioned one property in particular, and that's 40 Wall Street. And it kind of harkens back to this moment of the trial. I remember when Trump was giving his testimony in his discursive and meandering style, and he said that Tish James doesn't even know where 40 Wall Street is, and she laughed out loud because she could see it from her office.
Right.
And other people from the AG's office were laughing too. One wonders if that's what she has her sights on. And Trump did say his entire pitch to the appellate court in trying to halt this process is that the real estate isn't liquid and that the bonding companies won't work with him as a result of that. Now, the AG says that's not true, that maybe his properties aren't as valuable as he says they are.
Right. There's something. They could probably add up a bunch of properties and come up to the amount of money he needs. I guess the issue is you both have mentioned this roadmap. We know where Donald Trump's finances are, at least the Attorney General does. What is this business of him potentially declaring bankruptcy or companies declaring bankruptcy? What's his personal culpability versus these 500 entities that Donald Trump has?
So if you look at the judgment lays out which entity has culpability, has liability for the judgment, is a judgment debtor, no longer a defendant, but has moved on to being a judgment debtor, owes the money. And one owns $125 million and another $200 million. It's a lot of money. He could declare bankruptcy. An entity could declare bankruptcy, but bankruptcy doesn't wipe the debt clean. Bankruptcy pauses and brings in a bankruptcy judge and a bankruptcy trustee to sort out where are the assets and where are the liabilities, and he'd still have to pay. Assuming that his assets still exceed the liabilities, he'd still be on the hook and the entities would still be on the hook.
Adam, this idea of raising money from a foreign source, particularly foreign government, it's speculation. There's no sense that that's true, which surprised me about that Fox interview. Because you would think the answer to that would be a resounding no. Of course, we're not trying to raise money from the Russians or the Saudis. I don't know if either of you understand that answer about why I said, well, there's rules and things like that. But it made me think maybe you are talking to a foreign entity about paying these bills.
It's a classic non-denial denial.
Right.
She didn't say we are putting this off the table, just as you mentioned, but she didn't say we're going to do this. It's a way to kind of dodge the question in a textbook style that every journalist and reporter looks out for.
Adam, one thing I haven't understood since the beginning of this is we know that Donald Trump raises money every time he feels under threat in some fashion. Would that be sufficient? Would that be legal? If he did this campaign and said, save Trump Tower, every Trump supporter give $1 before midnight, and he raises the money?
Look, it's not easy to raise $500 million.
Right. Even for Donald Trump.
Even for Donald Trump. Right. B, I don't think that you can use campaign money to pay for an appellate bond on your personal liability. There are campaign finance laws, and they prohibit that sort of thing.
There were many bizarre things about Donald Trump's presidency, but one that was notably consistent and equally confusing was his odd obsession with appliances.
But sinks, toilets, and showers, you don't get any water. People are flushing toilets 10 times, 15 times, as opposed to once. Sinks, right? Showers. And what goes with a sink and a shower? 10 times, right? 10 times. Wow, Bob, not me, of course, not me.
I feel if you need to flush the toilet 10 times, you should speak to your doctor. But Trump was very fixated on the energy efficiency efforts of past administrations. He even made it a point to roll back more than 100 environmental rules while he was in office. And now that he's campaigning for a second shot at office, he's got a new obsession, one that's got less to do with the bathroom and more to do with the driveway.
We are a nation whose leaders are demanding all electric cars, despite the fact that they don't go far, cost too much, and whose batteries are produced in China with materials only available in China.
On day one, I will terminate Crooked Joe's ridiculous electric vehicle mandate. It's so ridiculous.
Kind of amazing that he still says China like that. Trump says that electric cars will kill the U.S. auto industry and the economy, which is not true. In fact, the car industry has been crystal clear that electric vehicles are the future. It's the logical economic path and a crucial transition to make it if we plan to confront climate change, a crisis that is primarily fueled by oil and gas emissions. And this very reason is why the latest regulatory move by the current president, President Biden, is in fact a huge deal. Today, the Biden administration announced a new rule on tailpipe emissions, which may not sound monumental on its face, but experts are hailing it as the single most important climate regulation in the history of the country. Let's talk about this. Joining me is the renowned climate activist and author Bill McKibben. Bill, thank you for being with us. I want to get your take on this because a lot of people who are serious about climate say we have to change the way we move around. We have to think about movement differently than our car-obsessed society does. But while we remain a car-obsessed society, this seems to me like a step in the right direction.
Well, for sure. Put it in context. You know, today, the World Meteorological Organization reminded us that 2023 was the hottest year in the last 125,000. They issued what they called a red alert for climate change. So far, 2024 is hotter than 2023. We've got to do something, and that means we've got to do something about what in America is one of the biggest sources of emissions, transportation, cars and trucks. This rule that Biden put forward today is not that strong. It actually relaxes somewhat the trajectory that they were on, because the UAW, the Auto Workers Union, and others have said maybe we're moving a little too fast, but it does continue the momentum towards the electrification of our automobile fleet. And if you think about, Ali, the things that we have to do to deal with climate change, this is not a very hard one. What we're asking people to do is, over the next decade, change in their current car for one that's probably already cheaper or headed that way, that's quieter, that has fewer moving parts, that costs a lot less to operate. That's not a particularly large sacrifice to demand. The main sacrifice, of course, comes from the fossil fuel industry, who wants to keep selling you gas forever.
Right.
And so today they announced they were launching a 7-figure ad campaign in the swing states, accusing Biden of a electric vehicle mandate, which this, for better or for worse, is not. Trump, you may recall, last weekend promised a bloodbath in America.
Yep.
And the thing that he was talking about when he talked about the bloodbath was electric vehicles. So, like it or not, climate change and the things we have to do to begin to deal with it is now front and center in this campaign.
Yeah, and I think you make an interesting point, because there are people, including yourself, who think that if we want to take this as seriously as we should, it requires massive behavioral change, not just behavioral change, but infrastructure change, right? So that we can use public transit more than our own cars. But that said, this shift, this emphasis on electric vehicles will be almost indiscernible to people who make the shift. Right? All that happens is you charge your car as opposed to you go to the gas station, which makes me wonder why Donald Trump gets so invested in the fact that this is some kind of an evil takeover by bad people. It just doesn't make that much of a difference to most people.
As usual, the guy has no idea what he's talking about. He said the other day that electric vehicles only go 15 miles. I've been driving an EV for years, and it goes 250. The ones that they're building now go 400 or 500. And I mean, so part of it's that, but mostly it's the fact that the Republican Party on these issues for years now has been a wholly owned subsidiary of the fossil fuel industry. And the biggest threat to them is that people will stop having to fill up all the time. Look, I hardly even remember how to operate the gas pump anymore, because I just plug into the wall at home. And, you know, the price of running that car is much smaller than it was before. It's good for me. It's bad for Exxon. And that should give you some clue as to why the fossil fuel industry has launched this 7-figure ad campaign.
Bill, does this give you confidence? And I ask you this as a proxy for people who don't think that Donald Trump's going to be the answer to fighting climate change, but who are a little bit dissatisfied with the pace at which the Biden administration has gone on this, despite some major milestones that they have achieved. Does this feel like movement in the right direction meaningfully, or not really?
No one's ever moving fast enough, but in this case, the choice could not be clearer. I mean, Third Act, this organization for people over 60, endorsed Biden this week. And one of the biggest reasons was because it's abundantly clear that if we elect Donald Trump, it will be a full-on pound the brake halt to the momentum that's developed around renewable energy. It's not that Biden's doing everything right. He's not, because he's in a politically constrained environment. But he is reorienting our society in the right direction, beginning to spend the money that we need, and given 4 more years would probably make some serious progress. The contrast between that and the guy who, remember, pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accords last time, the guy who told us that global warming was a hoax invented by the Chinese. I mean, come on. How many floods and fires and droughts do you have to see before you understand that really it's time to start moving?